Good evening.
Good evening.
So let's talk about monsters.
Monsters?
Yes.
All right. Dinosaurs?
Two interesting questions about monsters. Once you have encountered your monsters and talked to them, then what? How do you get rid of them?
Well, you have to kill them.
Okay. Can you explain? No
Well,
violent killing?
If I make a reference to the scriptures, scriptures have many self-contradictions, and in some it says, "Thou shalt not kill," and so everybody knows, "Thou shalt not kill." But then there is the Bhagavad Gita, in which God tells the hero, "Thou shalt kill." So people don't know whether you should kill or not kill. But in the case of monsters, you have to destroy them. And in India there are very interesting icons about this. The women, the goddesses, who are called Shiv Shaktis, they are good killers.
Mm-hmm.
And they destroy monsters, usually by trampling on them underfoot. So they have a sweet smile while doing it. So it's a very different mentality from the Christian approach, where thou shalt not kill unless it's an infidel or a heretic or something like that, in which case, free for all, anything goes. So it's always been full of contradictions.
So, how to get rid of them? How to kill them?
How to kill them? Oh, well, you have weapons. And if we go back to the goddesses, some of them have 8 arms, which means 8 different kinds of weapons. So one of them is a trident, which is like a spear with 3 ends. You can kill with that. Another is a flower. You can also kill with that. Lotus flower, which means detachment. There's a story about, the magician Merlin. And so there was a woman along with Merlin. I forgot her name for a minute. But anyway, she represented the pre-Christian religion. And it faded out of existence because people forgot her. You can destroy someone by just forgetting they exist. And so that's another way. You can destroy with this discus. I referred for a second to the swastika, so this is that discus. And swastika means self-knowledge. So when you rotate the cycle of self-knowledge, then you know yourself to be victorious by definition, which means the monsters are killed by definition. So it's their identity to be killed. It's a question of asserting that. And so there's many ways to kill the monsters. But you don't run away because they run faster. So you have to turn around and face them. And so this is why I was saying you make them come up. You can even destroy them. There's one of the Indian deities called Shankar who has a big third eye. Goddesses also have third eye. You can sort of send a flame.
And Kali.
Kali, yes, yeah. So the fire can kill like that, flamethrower. But, you know, one must not be namby-pamby about them.
Okay. There's a question I don't understand the context quite, but can monsters protect you?
Well, I think it's good to have not a monster, but a fierce big cat. Like most of the goddesses, I keep going back to the goddesses because they're good, fierce ladies. And they usually ride on lions, tigers. You know, you go around with your pet tigers and lions, not much is going to come after you.
So you're talking about spiritual powers?
Yes, the symbolism is really interesting to know because if you have a big cat, the symbolism of the big cat is that you have power over physical pain. And so sometimes your monster takes the form of illness, bad illness, cancer or something, and you have power over it. That's, they call it control over matter. And so that's represented by the big cat. So if you are immune to torture, that's powerful.
That's probably also related to detachment, isn't it?
Well, that's detachment from your physical body. One thing is detachment from your physical body, and another thing one has to have detachment from character assassination. That's another thing that happens, character assassination. The proof of being a great, fierce warrior lady is that you actually go through the motions of dealing with all these things. And you're still here to tell the story.
This is an interesting question as well. Criticizing someone on the basis of false morality doesn't have anything to do with whom the person is, and it can also disturb the soul. But how about compliments? Do you empower someone, and when do you disempower someone?
To give due regard is not a compliment. To give due respect is not a compliment. To give recognition to someone for what they did, this is correct. And so you can call it a compliment, but I think there's something else. You see, if you pump someone up by telling them all kinds of stuff and then put a pin in that balloon, I mean, people do that. And that's manipulation. So that's not a compliment. Then criticizing people, it depends if you're critiquing or criticizing, because some people don't know the difference between those two. And I think it's very necessary to critique, but to find fault endlessly is a vice. So when somebody is constantly finding fault with you and you are in your power, you know, you tell them, have a nice day, see you around. You don't need those people. When you're creating this radiance that I was talking about earlier, you know, you draw to yourself people who are like you. And people who are not like you, maybe they get jealous, maybe they criticize, whatever it is, but it's not your problem, it's their problem. So they need to be a little bit further away. You don't need to let them be around.
Yeah, I think it's related to something which is artificial, like a culture or, you know, like pleasing someone.
Oh, well, these are psychological illnesses, right? People pleasing, fawning. I mean, it's so well known now in the world that I don't think anybody can get away with it because it's immediately identified. Too many people will point the finger and say, hey, what do you think you're doing? That was, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, like you see it like on television when there's an interview and they say, welcome to our show, and they say, thank you for having me. And this is like a...
Oh, that's politeness, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, you have to.
Yeah.
A little bit politeness is okay.
So that's allowed. Okay.
Yeah, but that's like a protocol.
Yeah. Sometimes it feels like artificiality.
Well, I think you have to be sensitive to the good taste, reasonable, proper protocol, but not over. You see, it has to be correct.
This is the thing.
Anytime it's too much, it's suspect, right?
And this is about character. In psychology, character is seen as a given fact of a personality. But can you really change your character?
Different people use the word character in different ways, but in ancient times, character is like a character in a movie or a character in a novel, so they have good and bad qualities. It is said, cultivate your character. And so the idea in personal development is to develop your character, that you have characteristics that correspond to a high-quality human being, which is constantly being figured out. It's to do with bravery and courage and nobility and handling opposition and making a combination of high qualities.
Perhaps it's more a personality, a persona. Perhaps it is persona.
Persona. Again, it depends on you, what you're going to make of yourself. But I think there's also another expression which is quite useful, is you need to be a good judge of character. You need to know, to recognize who's lying, who's not, who's real, who's not, who's going around betraying people, who knows the meaning of love, who has hidden agendas and what they are. So if you are very perspicacious, you can see. And so it is said you cannot lie to an honest person, they'll pick it up right away. And so if you want to be able to know what's going on, you make yourself really clean and clear, and you get it, what's going on. But if you're all fuzzy and not clean, you won't understand what's going on.
So this question, can you really change your character, means work in progress?
Well, what I think you can do, when somebody is affected by trauma, psychologists say you have 4 reactions: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So if you're doing any fighting, flighting, freezing, or fawning, you need to take care of it. That means you have to work through your stuff. And if you work through your stuff, then you become a very solid person who is not using these devices to survive. So people who have been affected by trauma, they kind of go into survival, and these are signs of people in survival. And so you need to move out of that, and that's what personal work is all about. So you come into your power and you become real, a solid person, and that's a healed person.
I think this question is related to it, talking about trauma and karma. Trauma, as we know, can also be transferred to or inherited from another generation in the same family. This concerns someone. In fact, this is the wife of the person asking this question. She spent her time from the age of 2 to 5 in a Japanese prisoners camp. Is this trauma or karma or both? What can one do about it, whether it is karma or trauma? And what about the next generation?
The whole thing has to be healed, and it does go through generation after generation after generation. And there are some, I've been doing a lot of work about what happens to people as a consequence of colonialism. And that's an example of something that's carried generation to generation to generation, because it lasts for several generations anyway. And there's a lot of resentment and hatred, preconceptions, and behaviors that are sort of coming from the subconscious because they're so deep. And then there's a lot of preconceptions that are transferred. The way a child is raised by traumatized parents is very damaging. And the child thinks it's normal until they come in contact with other people who've been raised differently, and then it's very problematic. So there's a lot of psychological damage, and the interaction between psychologically damaged people amplifies it. And so it's very difficult to resolve it. There are occasionally good therapists, very occasionally. So it's becoming well known, it's becoming something that's naturally talked about among people, and people are becoming wiser about it, and so it becomes possible to work it through.
But the question, either it's trauma or karma, it's still something very deep inside the soul.
Well, you can't really say, because you can argue for both. You have to examine the individual instances to make a determination. If it's karma, it means that you're in a situation because you put other people in that same situation, and then you get in that situation. And you would have the sanskaras of damaging other people in that way. There's plenty of people who do that, who reincarnate, and what are they going to do? Something similar. Whether what's happening to them is karma or trauma, definitely you will say it's trauma. For your own self, you want to understand if it's karma. Anyway, it's trauma. To what extent are you responsible for this trauma happening? The way you relate to it is an indicator. So if you have a sense that you deserve it, that's a sign of karma. If you have a sense that you're paying, that's a sign of karma. And a lot of people, they don't have a sense that they're paying. They're confused. They say, why is this happening to me? It's not reasonable. It's too complicated to make a general statement. You see, that's the thing.
A close family member who seems to have narcissistic traits wants to have a one-to-one conversation with me. He wants me to open up about what is going on inside of me. I feel vulnerable and not verbally strong enough to have such a conversation with him. I definitely don't want a therapeutic conversation. Do you have a suggestion how I can deal with the situation?
Yeah, have somebody strong with you. You need a guard, because otherwise it would be very abusive. And you feel that, you know that. And so if you're going to do it, then you have to have somebody very competent, like a kind of lawyer, and say, yeah, I will have this discussion with you if I have this Doberman pincher here and this lion over here and this lawyer here, and okay, now shoot. There are so many people who try and trap you like that, and you have to be a bit on your guard. It's like that.
Yeah, also, sometimes people really feel that they have a right to approach you in that way.
Oh, they most certainly do, and you have a very good right to put them on the nose.
This is about honesty and what you said before. You cannot lie to an honest person. Does that mean that when you are being lied to, you are not an honest person?
When you're being lied to?
You are not an honest person because you cannot lie to an honest person. So if somebody lies to you...
No, you cannot lie. Of course they will lie to you, but you'll know. So if they're lying to you, you'll say, yeah, right, very good. Tell me another one. Because you know. The thing is, if somebody lies to you and you don't know, it's like either they're really, really good liars, and some people are, but you need to be pretty sensitive, smart to understand. I mean, look how much spam you get on the phone and this and that. It's all liars trying to lie to you. But you get experience, you know, this is lies, this is spammers. So same way with people. Otherwise people say, oh, I get really angry because so-and-so lied to me. You shouldn't. If somebody lied to you, then don't get taken in. Not get angry. That's an illogical response.
You talked about deep learning. Can you please tell more about it? What do you mean by deep learning?
You said this afternoon, deep learning is needed to get you to your next goal, possible raising you up to the next level of spirituality.
Spirituality is on many, many, many levels. It's a constant upgrading all the time. And every so often you're on a level which you shouldn't be on. You should be on further up. And so there are circumstances which let you know that create a certain frustration and that you feel blocked sometimes. And in that sense, when you really understand stuff, you make yourself understand it and it propel you to another level, because you can't stay on the same level indefinitely. It's just meaningless. There's no progress. It's not spirituality anymore, it becomes ritualism. And there are things that you can't learn until you're a certain degree of subtlety, a certain amount of experience. Otherwise you can't learn, because you're shifting the functioning of your consciousness. That means there has to be insights, there has to be a certain kind of ability to perceive that you didn't have before, and all of a sudden you start to be able to have, and things are different, you are different, and then your thinking is different, and you learn something that you cannot be that old way anymore.
And this is also connected to, can you change your character, your personality?
Well, when you're working through your stuff, you get insights, you see. Once you've got an insight, then you can't go back because you know too much. But until you know, you don't know. And so it's because of that you have to understand that shifting consciousness is a jerk thing, not a smooth thing. It's like you get it. Before you got it, you didn't get it. Then you get it, then you can't go back.
Mm-hmm.
You know. And if you slip back by being inattentive, then then something will come along and knock on the door of your mind and say, hey, wake up, you've gone to sleep again, what's this? Get with the program.
Mm.
When you're developing yourself spiritually and you're moving forward, there's the opposite force which is trying to stop you all the time and trying to make you go back and slip up and forget and become unconscious. So once you start doing this, you activate that resistance, and that means you can't stop because the resistance is not going to stop.
This is also about resistance and blockages. How do you make sure you do what you know you should do, and what do you need to keep it up?
What do you need to keep it up?
Yeah.
Perseverance to keep it up. Everybody knows what they should do, and they also know that they don't always do it. And partly you don't always do it because you don't want to be rigid. And you need to allow yourself some flexibility. So that's okay. But sometimes you don't do what you should do because you want to be able to not do it, because you want to prove to yourself that you're okay without doing it, except that you're not. And eventually you get the message that, no, you have to do it, and so you have to do it.
And the role of your conscience?
Your conscience will tell you, and you will say, not necessary. And your conscience will say, see you later. I'll leave you now. Oh, no. So it's like a relationship. But I think it's that you have to take yourself seriously and take your practice seriously. Eventually you say, yeah, well, I better take this seriously because it's counterproductive to not. And you have to get that.
I think that perhaps you're also suppressing something. You kill your conscience, isn't it?
You kill your conscience about other things. You kill your conscience that you do bad things. That way you kill your conscience. But keep yourself in line and keep moving forward. I think that's not a matter of killing the conscience. It's a matter of being lazy.
Okay.
But kill your conscience is when you corrupt people and when you really do bad things because of greed, or you want power, or something like that. That's not good. But being lazy is forgivable,
Mm. But also maybe lack of determination.
Well, lack of determination, then you'll see everybody else goes ahead of you, and that will motivate you to catch up. But you see, some people, they want to, but can't.
Mm.
And so then you have to decide for yourself, okay, I would like to, but I just don't have it in me to do it. So then you have to come to terms with that. You see, because not everyone is that level. This is quite difficult to do this kind of work. So it should not be considered as something that everybody should do as a matter of course. No, I think that's very unrealistic. I think it's very good to encourage others, to encourage oneself, but not to put pressure, because it becomes again counterproductive. You can put some pressure on yourself, but not too much, because if you put too much, you get a burnout. Be sensitive to what you can do. Maybe push yourself a little bit, but not too much, because there will be negative consequences. Like the sports people, they end up full of injuries.
Mm. This is, in fact, a very deep question because it's also related to the future. We don't know what the future holds,
Mm.
and anything can happen anytime.
Yes.
And so this could also work as like you disillusion yourself you say like, oh well, I mean, why should I make all the effort?
Well, that's called giving up.
Yeah.
And I would not recommend giving up.
Mm.
But you see, we're talking about balance here. I think it's quite individual. You have to really understand yourself, what you are, what you're made of, how much pressure you can take, how much pressure you can put on yourself. And do you want to maintain that endlessly, or do you want to give yourself a break every so often? What do you really want to accomplish? Really ask yourself this question, what do you want? As I think if you can answer that question, what you want, it will help you to understand how you want to do your spiritual practice, at what intensity, and what's your goal. And once you have reached your goal, then that's good. And it's quite hard for people to understand themselves.
Yeah, I was just thinking, this afternoon you also said that we don't know who we are. You don't know yourself.
You know yourself better than anybody else,
Sure.
but still, you don't always know. And I think by putting yourself in different challenging circumstances or accepting challenging circumstances, you get a sense of, how far you can go, what you can do, and there are many times where you want to do something and you keep wanting to do it, and time goes by and you're still wanting to do it and you haven't done it. And so you may decide to just lower your sights a little bit and do something that's doable, because then you get more satisfaction, sense of achievement and accomplishment by doing it like that. And maybe that becomes a step for going a little further. And sometimes people give up, and then after a while they say, no, I won't get back onto it again. And that's okay. All of it is okay, because who says what it should or shouldn't be? But I think it's quite good to have the map in front of you. Okay, you could go like this, and you can have this speed, or anywhere between this speed and that speed. And then you have to decide what's doable for you, because everybody has a different pace. Everyone has a different goal within the framework. And I think the most important thing is to be very true to yourself. And also, as time goes by, you change. And your priorities change. And your values even change. What you think is important changes. And whenever these changes happen, then you have to reanalyze yourself and renegotiate with yourself. And whatever is still going, keep going with that. And whatever is no longer an option, then you have to let that go. Because it's our life track. And we do it. And then I was talking earlier about how you get called to a higher destiny. And you may say, no, I don't want that. And it'll say, all right, I'll come around in a couple of weeks and talk to you about it again. And it comes around again. And so then you again have to decide. But I think we have many moments when you can decide to do something big. And you have many moments where you are given time to consider, you want to do this or not, or what, and how do you want to be, what. And along the way there are many lessons. Even when you're doing or not doing, there are still lessons coming along which are helpful for whatever is next. In some ways, I think of everything as a rehearsal for everything else. And that I find quite useful as an approach. Because as you say, nobody knows the future. But I think we try to be judicious, try to project what's happening in the present, what the trends are, and then you can see, look at your health condition, look at your mental health condition, and see what's realistic, And then there may be some unexpected things which mean you have to reconsider everything, and you can do that, and it's okay. And often we make decisions that we regret. We say, oh, that wasn't a very good decision. You have to wait for another window of opportunity to make a different decision, which would be a better one, and it's still okay.
Okay. How can I have compassion with my ex-husband whilst he is damaging the children so often with his actions and behavior? And how can I find the courage to not protect the children against him?
Why do you want to have compassion for him? You need to set limits and boundaries, not have compassion. You need to make some rules. And if somebody is damaging the children, then you need to discuss it. Identify what is the exact damage that's going on. Bring the children into it because they know, depending on their age and so on. But you don't have compassion for somebody who's doing damage. You have compassion for somebody who has damage done to them, I would say. But if a person is doing damage, it means that they have some issues. And there may be addiction issues, there may be all kinds of psychological problems. And then you may say, okay, you know, this is going on, this is regular, da 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 da. We have to have some rules here. And if you're going to do this, then this is not acceptable, so you can only see the children if you're also doing therapy, or something like this, you see. And that's called tough love, which is better than compassion, I would say, in that kind of situation. You don't have compassion for everything all the time, every day, indiscriminately. You've got to have discrimination.
Nowadays they say you need to have radical compassion.
What?
Radical, everything needs to be radical. Also compassion.
Radical compassion?
Yeah, that's what they say.
That's a nonsense idea.
Sociable.
You know, I don't agree with a lot of things like unconditional love, really bad idea.
I knew you were going to say
Forgiveness, what are you talking about? You think you're God? Do you think you can change the rules of karma? Not possible. I know, I'm not very fashionable.
Not at all. This is about sense perception and pure thought. Somehow pure thoughts are most relevant, and sense perception should not get leading importance. The quality of sense perception, like nature, the arts, music, etc., depends on deep perception, like good listening, watching. Can that be done without pure thoughts?
I'm really talking about a different thing. A sense perception is to do with relationships rather than appreciation of nature or the arts or something like that. Because in relationships, there are problems of prejudice. There's maybe prejudice, a gender bias or race bias or caste bias or religious bias or something like that. And you're unable to see the person because of these biases. And so therefore your interaction is faulty because all you can see is something that's not real. And considering it to be real, you interact or make evaluations or judgments based on something false. Whereas your appreciation of nature and the arts, which is definitely through sense perception, is up to you, you know, because you definitely get something from that. It's to do with discerning meaning and sustaining yourself through taking meaning out of high human achievement, which is a metaphor for something spiritual, actually. And even though you're approaching it through sense perception, it still has a higher meaning behind it, which is not the same as getting deceived by sense perception due to preconception and all that. It's a different story.
Okay. I saved the last question because it's interesting. Raj Yoga, Bhagavad Gita.
Mm.
Is there a great difference between Raj Yoga and Bhagavad Gita? Can I fully appreciate Bhagavad Gita without Raj Yoga? And is Raj Yoga not dependent on the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita?
Well, Raj Yoga is a form of yoga, which is talked about in the Bhagavad Gita. But there are problems in the Bhagavad Gita which need to be corrected. And if you're going to correct something that everybody in the whole world believes to be right, and you say, no, it's not right, it needs to be corrected, then you have to have all your ducks lined up and all the things to do that effectively. But Raj Yoga is the contact between the soul and the Supreme Soul that results in a kingdom. And so if you do not have a good definition of the soul, and you do not have a good definition of the Supreme Soul, and you do not have the possibility to make the contact between the two because the definitions are not right, then you cannot get sovereignty. That's where the corrections have to come in. So the Bhagavad Gita, as you can buy in the shops, is written by the people who put together the Vedas. And the Vedas is based on the principle that there's only one thing and all of it is matter. And that therefore there's no distinction between a soul and matter and God. And therefore the question of yoga cannot arise, because yoga demands there to be two different things which you connect with each other. Therefore there cannot be this concept of Advaita Vedanta. And so the discussion about Raj Yoga that is studied in Brahma Kumaris is in direct opposition to the Advaita Vedanta system of philosophy.
Because that's a non-dualism, isn't it? Advaita Vedanta is non-dualism.
Well, in English they call it non-dualism, but it's a kind of non-trialism because there are three things, you know. Because the philosophy that is the basis of Advaita Vedanta is based on certain yogic practices where the yogis wanted to discern what is real. And so they will use various different practices to go into altered states of consciousness. And if you would take ayahuasca, for example, you would go there and you would experience the oneness of everything for half an hour or so. Then you come back to normal reality where it's not practical. But they made philosophy based on these experiences. And in the process, you find that if you apply it to the generality of human experience, you take into consideration the philosophy of karma and lots of other things, you find that it's not realistic. It cannot be supported. There's too much evidence against it, you see. And if you take the concept of Advaita Vedanta all the way to the end, there's no possibility of any interaction because there's only one thing, and you can't have interaction with only one thing. So therefore there cannot be yoga, because yoga requires two things, and if there's only one thing and no interaction, there's no question of any kingdom. But everything is nothing at all. And so they say Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya, you know this expression, yeah? So Brahma Satya means that the element of light of nirvana is true, and everything here is not real. And so, okay, so nothing is real, so what you going to do? Live, die, what? You see, so it's very nice to make philosophical discussions, but when you set it against the reality, it's unrealistic, and it's packed full of contradictions, the philosophy. So you have to have a very sharp knife in your intellect to point out the inconsistencies and contradictions that is in the Vedantic philosophy. So you have to be sharper than the sharp people. So not everybody wants to do that, but I like doing that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, because it's fascinating, actually. But not for most people, but for me it's really fascinating.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope this was useful.
The ones who ask the question say yes. So that's fine.
Okay, well, great. Thank you.